Let's think about the style of this piece of music and what we need to be able to do to make it sound aggressive and make it sound fiery. Most of the bowings in this piece of music are going to be very broad and very heavy. Right here from the beginning, we have to establish the style with the quarter, eighth, eighth, quarter, eighth, eighth. The quarter notes should be broad, and that means the low strings are also going to have to match the broad strokes of the first violin, second violins, violas with their quarters and play all the way out to the rest. Okay. Sometimes when orchestras play this, they play the quarter notes short. They play short, 2 and 3, 4, and it just kind of sounds dorky. It doesn't sound like a group of mighty warriors going into battle. The other thing that happens when we play too short on the quarter notes is that we lose a lot of our phrasing, because the way this is written, we have everything in octaves and unisons here until the first violins go up a major second higher while everybody else is still on E, and that helps to build tension with that suspension as then they go up to G and start establishing E minor. Well, if we're playing super short, the phrasing opportunity is diminished because we really want to lean into the F sharp as we approach the G, and then the A, which is functioning as the seventh of this B minor minor chord. So we want to grow into the dissonances, and the strongest dissonance is probably going to be that major second. This harmonic progression in some form of fashion comes back a lot throughout this piece, so it's good to master the style from the get-go so that we can carry that style all throughout the piece and all throughout the dynamic range. So the dynamic range that's used here is mezzo piano up to fortissimo. Whenever I get a piece like this, I lower all the dynamics by 1. So mezzo piano becomes piano, mezzo forte becomes mezzo piano, forte becomes mezzo forte, and fortissimo becomes forte. That way we're in more of a normalized range. And I can also assign numeric values to each one of those: piano 1, mezzo piano 2, mezzo forte 3, forte 4. And that way we can bow some of these rhythms on an open string, like an open D string, to make sure that they're getting the style. And then as they're playing, I can give them information with the left hand so that they're getting louder, they're getting softer, and I'm making sure that they can transfer that style to a range of dynamics. Sometimes I also like to do crescendos and decrescendos so that we can expand the sound and contract the sound as we need to. There are places in this piece where we're going to need to do 2-measure crescendos, and that might help out a lot so that they can learn how to get louder while doing that. And there's some places in the phrase that naturally need to come down, so it's good to work on getting softer too. At measure 14, the violas start with the quarter, eighth, eighth, quarter, eighth, eighth for 2 measures. And then at 16, the second violins take it over. They kind of dovetail here. The violas get the downbeat, and then second violins take over, and they dovetail again. Violas get it until first violin, second violins, and violas get it at 20. Now, a lot of times I'll hear orchestras, and those styles don't match. Like, second violins are playing super short, violas are playing longer, or something to that effect. We got to make sure everybody's playing it the same way. Measure 32, we get this 2/16th note, 8th note pattern here, and it's pretty fun. The students like to play it. I like to listen to it. It's really fun here. The 8th note is marked short, and beat 1 and 2 are both marked with accents. So what are we going to do here? If we're going to play this 8th note short, we probably don't want to stop the bow on the string, because that's going to sound awkward, and we're not going to get the accent that we need for the up bow if that happens, because the release is going to be accented right before, so that's going to take away some of the effect from an accent here, even if the students do everything perfectly. So we want to have a tapered release here, and the best way to do that is to brush off the string. You can brush off the string in the same direction. It might be easier if you brush off in the opposite direction. So down, down, brush up bow, and then down bow for the accent might sound more effective as far as style and articulation goes. A lot of orchestras will just break that bowing there, and it sounds better. But you can brush down bow too. Down, down, brush up is going to work also. They're just going to need to re-grip for the brush stroke, and for a lot of students that takes a little bit more control, so it's easier for them to do an up bow, and they're going to have to re-grip again for the up bow accent, and they're going to really have to pull the accent up with the wrist and let the fingers follow. The longer lyrical melodies need to also be strong. Students need to play into the string, and they should probably vibrato. Especially the stuff on the E string for first violins, it's going to sound kind of bad if they're playing with straight tone. So even warriors need to vibrate when they're in battle. So make sure that everybody's vibrating on the long notes. My favorite part of Ablaze is this section here at measure 60. We drop down to mezzo piano, which is the softest dynamic, and we have this really cool pepperoni pizza rhythm and some really effective counterpoint here at 61 as the low strings drop out. We get the bass drop that comes back in 61, 62, along with that counterpoint and a crescendo as we build up to a forte in 64. 64 has the same quarter, eighth, eighth, quarter, eighth, eighth rhythms, but it's different from before because we have more of a moving line in the first violins against those E's. Second violins and violas have more motion too. So there's more counterpoint. Some of it's planing, some of it's contrary motion, but it's just a fun variation of what we had at the beginning. I think that Bernotis did a really effective job of stating the quarter, eighth, eighth, quarter, eighth, eighth rhythm and style in a simple way first, and then when it comes back here at 64, it's more complicated and more interesting, but we're already used to the style of the piece, so that layer of complication, complexity just works a whole lot better. It's just some really great writing. The same thing though in 64, we still have to retain that style, and we're likely to have style problems here if we didn't address those at the beginning, meaning that the quarter notes need to be long in cello basses and match the quarter notes in violins and violas. We don't want short quarter notes. That's going to sound dorky. I also really like the harmonic sequence here. The 60 through 64, we've got like this A minor to B minor exchange here, and then of course at 64 where the A theme returns, we've got our traditional E to B, also B minor as well. We don't get the D sharps, but yeah, I find this to be a really cool harmonic progression. All right, 72 to the end. Most everything is accented. There's a few things that are not. There is an accent missing from the F sharp in the first violin part in measure 73. I think that's probably a mistake. I think that should probably be accented too. Maybe I'm wrong. In 76, we have that same pattern that refers back to the spot at 22, 23. And again, this needs to be played in the same way in the middle of the bow. And if you're going to brush down bow and then up bow accent, you need to do it that same way. If you're going to brush up bow, down bow accent, you need to do that the same way too. But the second 16th note and the staccato 8th note are not accented. And then the two détaché 16th notes are also not accented. But everything else is, well, and this part in the piano isn't accented for some reason either, but everything else is accented. So the more interesting parts are going to be what's not accented. So what do we do differently there? And for the slur notes, those just need to flow a little bit better and not be quite as heavy. It just kind of be more of an effect and flow into it. And the 16th notes need to be a lot lighter so that they don't drag and slow down. They're the only détaché 16th notes in this whole piece, in the penultimate measure and the final measure. So no accents because they need to be lighter. Otherwise, it could fall apart. For an orchestra that meets the classifications for which this piece was written. We've talked about a lot of problems already that we need to solve and how to solve them. In the next video, I'm going to talk about some other common problems that I haven't addressed already. So stay tuned for that one, and I'll give you some tips on how to go over some of this stuff specifically and also more generally for things that I tend to hear when I'm judging this piece or when I'm clinicking a group, and how I would suggest that you rehearse it to solve those problems so they don't show up in your performance. We'll see you in the next one.